Hello! Today we'll start exploring more advanced CSS topics. We will begin with units and sizing elements. We'll discuss various units, their use cases, and how to set the width and height properties using these units. By the end of this section, you'll have a solid foundation in CSS units, and what's more, you'll learn some new CSS properties and HTML elements too. Get ready because the next 2 days might be challenging. We will explore new ideas that we will use later in the course to create our awesome portfolio project. Don't forget to take breaks and have fun along the way. I'll keep things simple, but be ready to give it your best effort. Let's do this! Let's get started with units and sizing. In CSS, we have two types of units: absolute and relative. Think of absolute units like a ruler with fixed measurements, while relative units are like a rubber band that stretches or shrinks. You may know it from a gym. We can use these units to set many CSS properties that take a length, including width, height, font size, margin, or padding. You'll also learn about margin and padding more in the box model lesson. Absolute units, like pixels, are fixed and stay the same no matter what. Relative units, on the other hand, change their values depending on other things. For example, if you set an element's width to 50% of its parent, it will automatically resize when the parent element changes size. What do I mean by telling parent element? Let's see an example. A parent element is an HTML element that holds other elements, called child elements, inside it. In our example, the div element is the parent element, and the p element is the child element. Let's go back to the CSS units. To further illustrate the concept of absolute and relative units, let's look at some examples. In this example, the div element will always be 300 pixels wide, no matter the size of the screen or the font size. In this example, the div element will take up 50% of its parent element's width, meaning its actual width will change depending on its size. Let's explore some common units used in CSS and better understand their characteristics. Pixels are the most basic and widely used unit in CSS, representing an absolute measurement. They are ideal for situations when you want a fixed size that doesn't change, such as setting an image width or the border's thickness. Pixels are small dots on your screen that create pictures. The more pixels in an inch, the better the picture looks. But sizing with pixels can cause problems on different devices because screens have different resolutions. Let's take a look at an example. If you set an element's width to 100 pixels, it will always be 100 pixels wide, no matter the screen size or the parent element size. M is a relative unit based on the parent element's font size. When you use M, you tell the browser to calculate the size based on the parent element's font size. This way, your design can adjust to different user choices and browser settings. For example, if the font size of a parent element is 20 pixels, then 1em equals 20 pixels and 2em would be 40 pixels. Rem is another relative unit that works similarly to M, but it's relative to the root element's font size, usually the HTML element. This makes the rem consistent across your entire website, ensuring a uniform look and feel. Let's take a look at an example. If the root element has a font size of 16 pixels and you set a paragraph's font size to 1.5 rem, the actual font size will be 24 pixels. A percentage is a relative unit based on the parent element size. When you use percentages, the element size will change depending on the parent element size. For example, if a parent element is 800 pixels wide and you set its child element's width to 50%, the child element will have a width of 400 pixels. The relative units are very useful in responsive web designs. We will use them later in the course. I know this topic is a bit hard to understand, and there's some math to do here. But trust me, with experience, you'll be using these units on the fly with ease. Let's discuss some real-life examples to understand better when to use each unit we've learned. Let's now jump to the CodePen to write some code together. Use pixels when you want precise control over element sizing and positioning. For example, a common scenario is to create a header with a fixed height. Then pixels would be perfect. We start by creating a div with a class header. Next, inside the header class, we set the height property to 80 pixels. This means that the header will always have a height of 80 pixels, regardless of the size of the browser window. I'll also set some background color for the header. This way we can see how high it is. In the second example, we create a simple text box with a title and a paragraph. We use the M unit to make the font size proportional to the title's size. We first define the HTML structure for the text box, adding a div with a class text box, and inside it, one heading and a paragraph. Then, we define the base font size of the text box class in the CSS file. We also define the font size for the H1 and P tags. Here, the font size is defined in M units. So, in this example, we set the base font size of the text box element to 16 pixels. The title and paragraph have font sizes defined in M units, so their font sizes are proportional to the font size of the parent text box element. If you want to adjust the base font size of your text box, you only need to change the font size of the parent text box element. Title and paragraph font sizes will change together, keeping their sizes related. Let's experiment a bit. Imagine we want to increase the base font size in our text box. Let's change the font size of the text box class to 24 pixels. As you can see, by simply changing the font size of the parent element, we've also effectively changed the font sizes of the child elements. The H1 tag is now 48 pixels and the P tag is now 24 pixels, while still maintaining their size relationship. This demonstrates the power of M-units in creating scalable and responsive typography. By adjusting the base font size, you can control the font size of all child elements that use M-units. The third example shows how to use rem units. I like rem units very much because they allow you to create consistent and predictable font sizes on the entire website. Think of a site with many parts like headings, subheadings, and paragraphs. You want the font sizes to stay related, and you want to change the base font size easily if needed. Using rem units for your text is a perfect solution. Here's an example. Let's start with the HTML structure. We will create a simple web page with one main heading, H1, a subheading, H2, and minor heading, H3, and a paragraph, P. Now let's style these elements in our CSS section using rem units. We will start by setting the root element's font size to 18 pixels. Remember, rem units are relative to the root or the HTML element. Next, using rem units, we define the font sizes for our H1, H2, H3, and P tags. Let's get started with H1 tag. We want it to be larger than the base font size. So, 3 rem means 3 times the root font size. This means that the font size of our main heading is now 54 pixels. Similarly, we style the subheading represented by the H2 tag. The font size of our subheading is now 45 pixels. We follow the same pattern for the minor heading H3 and the paragraph P. The font size of our minor heading is now 36 pixels, and the font size of our paragraph text is 18 pixels. We set the root element's font size to 18 pixels. All other font sizes use rem units, so they change based on the root font size. Headings and subheadings are bigger, while the paragraph matches the root font size. If you want to change the base font size for the whole website, just change the root font size. All other font sizes will change with it. This makes it super easy to keep text consistent and adjust the design for different devices, accessibility, or user choices. We will use rem in the portfolio project, so it's really worth remembering and understanding it well. Let's go now to the percentage units. These units are relative to the parent element size and are especially useful when creating responsive designs. The element's width will be adjusted proportionally as the screen size changes. We will start with the HTML structure. Imagine we have a parent container and we have another element inside this container. Let's write it. Now we want to style these elements in our CSS file. Let's start with the container class. We want this container to take up the full width of its parent element, in our case the body of the web page, regardless of the browser screen size. We will use the width property and set it to 100%. Next, we want to style the element class. We want this element to take up half the width of its parent container. Again, we will use the width property, but this time we will set it to 50%. This means this element will always take up half the width of its parent container. So if the container's width changes, because the browser screen changes, for example, the element's width will adjust accordingly. This is the power of percentage units in CSS. This is really useful when you want your website to look good on all devices, big or small. This is what we call a responsive design. And that's it. You've learned about different types of CSS units and their use cases. You've also learned about new CSS properties, width and height. With this knowledge, you'll be able to size and position elements on your website with ease. But don't worry if you don't understand all the first time. This is only an introduction. We will expand on this topic later in our project, especially in the responsive design section. Additionally, you can check the demo I've prepared for you in CodePen. It shows how each of the units works. You can also experiment with them, manipulating their values. You'll find the link in the materials below. Enjoy! Hello, it's time to meet another fundamental concept of CSS, the box model. There are 5 important properties to sizing your HTML elements in CSS. In the previous lesson, you learned about using the width and height properties to size elements. Today, we will discover 3 additional properties: padding, border, and margin. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a solid understanding of how they work together. Next, we will also talk about the box sizing property. It's a very important one because it can change how we calculate elements' total width and height. Let's get started. Imagine the box model as a picture frame where different layers work together to showcase a beautiful image. In web development, these layers help us position and style elements on a web page. Let's take a closer look at the 4 main components of the box model. Content. This is the base layer, representing the actual text, image, or other information displayed within an element. Think of it as the picture in the frame. It has its width and height. The padding is the area around the content, making a gap between the content and the border. It ensures the content has some space and isn't pushed too close to the border. Padding is like the space around the picture in a frame, allowing the picture to be seen and look nice. For example, to add 20 pixels of padding to all sides of an element, you can use the following. You can also use 2 values to set different padding values for the top, bottom, and left-right sides. For example, to add 20 pixels of padding to the top and bottom and 10 pixels to the left and right, you can use the following code. If you want to apply different amounts of padding to different sides, you can use the different properties for padding, which allows you to set the padding values for each side separately. This example will apply 10 pixels of padding to the top of an element, 20 pixels to the right, 30 pixels to the bottom, and 40 pixels to the left. And what's more, you can use a shorthand to write it all in one line like this. Just remember its order. First is padding top, next is padding right, next is padding bottom, and padding left at the end. It's a clockwise direction starting from the top. You can use each of these techniques. It depends on you what style you like. Let's go to the next property. The border is the line around the content and padding. You can change its size, look, and color to fit your design. The border is like a picture frame that holds everything together. You can specify the border size using a length value in pixels, ems, rems, or other units. You can also use the keywords thin, medium, and thick to specify the width of the border. For the border style, you can choose one of the following values: solid, dotted, dashed, double, groove, rich, inset, and outset. The default style is none, which means no border will be displayed. The border color can be specified using a color value in hex, RGB, or HSL format. The border property can take up to 3 values separated by spaces. The first value sets the width of the border, the second sets the style, and the third sets the color. In this example, the border has 2 pixels wide with a solid style and a black color. You can also set the other border style, dotted for example. In this example, the border is set to 2 pixels wide with a dotted style and a blue color. Using the border width and border color properties, you can also set the width and color values separately. In this example, the border is set to 2 pixels wide and has a red color. The border style property is dotted. Finally, you can set different values for each side of the element's border using the border top, border right, border bottom, and border left properties. In this example, the top border is set to 2 pixels wide with a solid style and a black color, while the bottom border is set to 2 pixels wide with a dashed style and a blue color. What technique you use to set borders is totally up to you. Finally, the margin is the space around the outside of an element's box, giving room between it and other elements on the page. Think of the margin as the distance between different pictures on a wall, allowing each picture to be enjoyed separately. The margin helps set an element apart from its neighbors. To add margin to an element, you can use this example. This adds a 20 pixel margin to all sides of the element. If you want to use different margin sizes for each side, you can use separate margin properties to set the values individually. This is the same technique we used in the padding case. In this example, we set a 10 pixel margin at the top, 20 pixels on the right, 30 at the bottom, and 40 on the left. You can also use a shorter way to write these values in one line. The order goes clockwise, starting from the top, margin right, margin bottom, and margin left. Now that we've explored the box model's different layers, let's learn about the box sizing property in CSS. It helps you control how the size of an element is calculated. There are 2 main options: content box and border box. With the content box, the element's size is based only on the content area. Padding, border, and margin are considered outside the element's size. This is the default behavior in CSS, but it's a little unpredictable and harder to control element sizing with it. Imagine you have a small box, and when you add padding, the box becomes bigger because the padding is added outside the content area. In this example, the content area's width and height are 100 pixels each. The padding and border are added outside, making the overall width and height 150 pixels. On the other side, with a border box, the element size includes the content, padding, and border. The margin is still outside of the element size though. Think of it like a pizza box. No matter how thick the pizza is and how much padding is inside the box, the outer dimensions of the box stay the same. In this example, the element has a width and height of 100 pixels, including the content, padding, and border. The padding and border are inside the 100 pixels width and height, making the content area smaller. Do you see the difference now? To better understand the box model, I've prepared for you an easy-to-use demo in CodePen. Don't hesitate to check it in the additional materials below this video and experiment with it. It can really help you to understand the box model concept and differences between content box and border box sizing options. As you can see, moving forward with this coding challenge, you will find more complex concepts and techniques. Remember, it's natural to have some difficulties along the way. But with every video and step, you build stronger and stronger foundations. So don't get discouraged if you find some upcoming topics difficult. It's all part of the learning process. Just keep working and don't be afraid to ask for help. You are one of us and we are here to help you. Hello! Now that we have learned about the CSS box model, let's explore fun and engaging topic, transitions. Thanks to them, you can make your website more interactive and user-friendly. In this lesson, we will cover only the basics of CSS transitions. We will learn how to apply and trigger them using the hover state example. Before we dive into transitions, let's take a moment to understand the hover state in CSS. The hover state is a special kind of style you can use on HTML elements. It changes how things look when someone puts their cursor over the element. Do you remember when we learned about CSS selectors? We can add a hover state for each type of them. To use a hover state, add :hover in your CSS code. We are focusing on a button here. The styles in the hover part only happen when the user puts their cursor over the button. Now we are ready to use transitions. But what are transitions at all? Well, we can call it a simple animation, making style changes smooth and cool. You will see it in action. To create a transition, we need to use the CSS transition property. This property has 4 values you can set. Transition property, the CSS property you want to apply the transition to, such as background color or transform. Transition duration, the time it takes for the transition to complete, usually specified in seconds or milliseconds. Transition timing function picks the speed style for the transition, like how the animation goes. Choices are is, linear, is in, is out, and is in out. Transition delay, the time before the transition starts, also specified in seconds or milliseconds. Alright, let's create a simple example in CodePen using a button to see how it works. We will talk about buttons more later. Today, we want the button's background color to change smoothly when a user hovers over it. First, we'll create the basic button styles and HTML element for it. We are setting the initial background color to blue, the text color to white, and adding padding for spacing. Now let's add a transition for the background color. In this example, we specify that we want the background color to change over a duration of 1 second using the is and out timing function, which means the transition will start slowly, then speed up, and finally slow down again. Finally, we need to specify what happens when the user puts their cursor over the button. Now, when a user hovers over the button, the background color will change smoothly from blue to red in 1 second. Perfect, it's working! Let's add another transition to our button. We can scale its size when hovered. We will modify our existing button and add a new transform property for the transition. This property allows us to scale, rotate, and even move elements on the page. It's very useful. We will use a scale example today. Let's add the transform property to the transition property list, separated by a comma. This means we will apply a transition to both the background color and the transform property. Next, we need to specify how the button should transform when hovered. Let's add the transform scale property to the hover block. When hovered, this will cause the button to scale up by 10%, 1.1 times its original size. As you can see, you will learn new CSS properties with every video in the CSS section. You can also use the shorthand transition property to set all 4 values at once. This code does the same thing as the previous examples, applying transitions to the background color and the transform property with a 1 second duration and the easing out timing function. Alright, that's all for now. Today you've learned about simple CSS transitions and how to trigger them using the hover state. We've also covered how to apply multiple transitions to different properties such as background color and transform. There are countless transition possibilities as you can use them for a wide range of CSS properties like color, width, height, and many more. With the right combination of transitions, you can create more complex and visually good-looking effects that seriously improve the user experience on your website. As you continue learning, you will explore more and more CSS transitions. For now, it's out of the scope of this challenge. Don't be afraid to experiment with different properties, durations, and timing functions. The more you practice, the better you'll become at creating interactive projects. In the next parts of the challenge, we will apply the transitions and other styling techniques we've learned so far to make the portfolio project look even better. Keep practicing and remember, the only limit to what you can create with CSS is your imagination. Congratulations on completing the Delicious Delights menu in HTML. Now that we've learned some CSS fundamentals, it's time to take our menu to the next level by adding some style. In this exercise, we will apply the CSS concepts you've learned so far to make the menu look more visually appealing and colorful. Here's your new mission. Add CSS styles to your existing Delicious Delights menu using a popular color palette and the specific property values below to make it look even more professional. In this exercise, we will focus on applying a background color to the page, styling the headers with different colors, adding a border and hover effect to the sections, adjusting the font sizes and colors for improved readability. Let's get started. First, log into your CodePen account and open the pen you used for the Delicious Delights menu. Remember, in CodePen, you can write your CSS directly in the CSS window without linking it to the HTML file. So, as you write some styles in the CSS window, it will appear immediately. Please include all the styles I wrote down in the materials section below this video. You'll find specific instructions, what styles you should apply, and colors to use. And that's it for our colorful Delicious Delights restaurant menu exercise. Once you've finished applying the styles, check out the solution video to compare your work against the example. Hello again, Coder woman! In this video, I'll walk through the solution for the Delicious Delights restaurant menu styling exercise. Let's dive in and start adding styles to our restaurant menu. First, log into your CodePen account and open the pen you used for the Delicious Delights menu. In the CSS panel, apply the styles we mentioned in the exercise step by step. And don't forget to save your pen after it. Now let's review the changes we've made to the menu's appearance. We've applied a light background color to the entire page and set the font family for a clean modern look. We've used different colors for the headers, H1, H2 and H3, to make them stand out and draw attention to each section. We've also aligned them to the center for better presentation. We've added a border to each section and a hover effect that changes the border color when the mouse is over the section. This adds some interactivity and visual interest to the menu. Finally, we've adjusted the font sizes and colors of the paragraph text for improved readability and contrast against the background. And that's it for this video. I hope you've enjoyed this hands-on exercise. Now that you've completed the task, I encourage you to experiment with the code yourself. Try changing the colors, font sizes, and other design elements to make the menu individual and even more good-looking. Remember, there is no one correct solution in coding, and experimenting is an excellent way to learn and develop your own personal style. You can also explore other CSS properties and techniques we haven't covered yet in the challenge. As you continue learning, you can create even greater websites than this. Keep practicing, experimenting, and moving forward in your coding journey. Remember, the more you practice, the better you'll become. Good luck and happy coding! See you in the next lesson!